Okay, you can also set up a file that might be like once a week. You count for a really long time for background, and it'll use. You can select a file and lane to take that background out. Okay, we don't want to subtract background right now.
Sorry, my phone got a phone call and it was interrupted. Could you please go over the normalization again? Sorry.
Okay, the normalization is the ability to take a normalization acquisition of the normalization lane and then apply that to your unknown samples. What it will do is it will look at the uniformity of the normalization lane, and it'll create a series of or a normalization factor for each channel. So let's say it's like this. Down here it's a little low, so the normalization channel would increase. Okay, over here it's kind of high, it would decrease that so that the response across the detector would be level. So then you take your unknown sample, and then it applies those correction factors to your unknown sample. So what you do is you periodically make a normalization file, so you acquire this in your method. Okay, you acquire a normalization lane, and then you click on this, and you pick up the data file in the lane. Of course, we don't have any data yet, so I can't do that. That's what you do.
But you don't have to do that, do you?
You don't have to do that. I'm just explaining the whole program because I came out here to do installation and training, and I'm doing it all.
I'm as a user, I don't know all of this stuff.
Yes.
That's
So
new
at the
to
end of
me.
the day, when you say, "Gee, Matt did a really lousy job of training us," I can say, "No, I showed you everything." It's also in the manual. The manuals are right here. This is the AR-2000 manual, or no, that's the AR-2000 and WinScan manual, and then there's the AR-2000 manual. They're right there, PDFs. Integrations, integration technique, you have two ways: none, preset region, or peak search. Peak search is, we'll get to that in just a minute, because right now we want to get a preset regions. We're gonna make this one. What we're gonna do is define the regions, okay? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna break this up into 9 segments. We're gonna start at 10 millimeters and 30, add 30, 50, add 70 to 190.
Can you name regions?
No, not with the software.
Okay.
Our new software, you can. Okay, so these are preset regions, and it's just breaking this up into 20 centimeter chunks, or millimeter chunks. Then if you were using the peak search, okay, the slope is in counts per millimeter. So if you have a low slope, this is in peak searches in what peaks do I want? And the slope is, if it's a high slope, it's a peak that goes up like this. So if you have something that goes like this really slowly and comes down, it might be a peak, but it might not. And if you really want those, then you would have a very low slope put in there in your peak search. Okay, but if you only want if you don't want the rolling hills, but you want the sharp rocky mountains only, then you would put a high slope filter. Okay. Then the minimum percentage of total, that would mean that of the radioactivity, say I have a peak from here to here that's 90%, well, that's great, but I want to see any impurities of, say, less than 10% of the total activity, I would put in 10% of the total. Right now it's at 1. So now relatively small peaks are going to be detected. But if I want to only have 5% peaks or less, because I don't care about 1% peaks, I would do that. And this is the minimum width of how wide the peaks are, because maybe it's really low activity, it's just a couple random blips, okay? Say no, a real peak has to be kind of wide. It's got to be 6 to 10 millimeters, and you can also apply a filter in there.
It's a nanometer or millimeters?
Millimeters, yes. And then background regions, you can add background regions. You can tell it to automatically find background regions. Those will be a very low activity and how wide they are. Okay, finally, the report contents. This is the one you always want to have. Size for one-page report, because then it'll put the table and the graph all in one. Okay, so that is it. In this peak search, we're not going to be using the peak search because we selected preset regions. If you want to have it automatically search, you do that. Okay? Okay, so now we're going to acquire. You go to the collection queue, okay? And then you add, and you pick out what method you want. We want the normalization method, and then you put in a name. And we'll call it norm1. 1 minute. You can change some of the parameters at runtime, such as the maximum time, those sorts of things, the number of lanes, the current position. You can change these and have the display results there checked.
Okay, origin and front.
Right. For this, we're not. It doesn't matter. It's wide open from 0 to 200. So the origin in front. That's when you're doing your solvent, your TLC plate. Say most people typically use 100 millimeter plates, okay, and they'll put their spot, the origin, at 10 millimeters, and then they let the solvent run up to 90 millimeters. That's very common. So there you would have origin of 10. Well, it depends on where you set the plate, okay? So we'll get into that in a little bit. Right now we got to do this normalization.
Sorry.
Yeah, we'll set up a realistic method right now. Okay, so now you have a queue. You could have multiple acquisitions in the queue, and we are going to click on Start. Oops, I'm going to put this down. Motion failure, moving to position, okay. So that didn't go too well because I didn't have it in position. I had it sitting up in the air and then I moved it when I tried to start. So now we've got to set up another acquisition. Add method, normalization, file name norm2. Display everything's good. Hit OK. Now we can hit start when we're ready. I wasn't ready last time. You want to adjust this wheel so that the flow rate is between 2 and 2.5 minutes, anywhere in there, 2.5 liters per minute.